Good morning. I'm Mark Allen with Gaper.io, and I'm here today with Ryan Damm, the CEO of Visby. Good morning, Ryan.
Good morning, Mark. How you doing?
Good. How you doing?
Very, very well.
So is that your actual background or is that a virtual
It
background?
is. It is not synthetic. This is just a bunch of ivy in our backyard here.
Cool.
Slightly different scenery than we're used to at the office, that's for sure.
Yeah, and this is actually not my actual background.
That's right.
What a surprise. Speaking of backgrounds, can you share a brief background of yourself and your work experience?
Yeah, so I'm a bit of a filmmaker, camera hacker, software hacker. I've always been working in some kind of video production, and over the course of my career, played around with a lot of hardware, played around with a lot of software, and found myself really interested in virtual reality just a few years back. And that I transitioned into working in holographic tech from there. I don't get to play with cameras directly that much anymore, but that is still very much a big part of what I care about.
Oh, very cool. So what has been your experience with remote employment, both as a remote employer and employee?
Well, it's funny. It's been strangely mixed. I actually worked for a German company for a few years, doing tech development and video production, but I was insulated from the gap because there was a guy who kind of stood up the business unit. So I was locally reporting to a guy that lived here in the Bay Area, and then he suddenly passed away, and I suddenly was stuck with being a direct report to a manager 9 hours time zone differences away, and that was really challenging. It was
Mm-hmm.
really, really difficult. But then when I started Visby, we started out as remote by default, mostly because I'm just a cheapskate. And so we would squad at co-working spaces, and I would just be like, well, everyone has offices in their home or desks, so we just issue laptops, and away we go. And that worked pretty well. And then I think around our fifth or sixth hire, one of the questions in sort of the final interview as I'm trying to sell this engineer on joining, she asked me, well, when are we getting an office? And I was like, oh, I guess we should probably get an office, huh? So it was kind of pulled out of me to go back to having an office. I love the no commute thing, but there was something they all wanted to be able to frankly probably put all their computer equipment somewhere, so it wasn't like clogging up their apartments. So we went from being remote to being having an office and me having a commute, and then the last couple of months I'm kind of back to the old rhythm, which is it's a little refreshing, but it's been an interesting little perspective when it's forced on you like that.
Yeah, and where is your office? Is it in the city?
It is in the city. It is down near the ballpark. It's
Oh,
still there. One of our engineers stopped by the other day and sent us all a nostalgic photo of where we used to be.
interesting.
Yeah.
And I have done that commute.
Oh, it's not fun.
It's like
It's
so
not fun.
painful.
It really is.
The
Yeah.
favorite is
It's brutal.
yes,
I like the commute where I roll out of bed and walk 20 feet. That part's pretty great.
yeah. Well, the commute across the Bay Bridge isn't bad at 4 a.m. But
Well, it's funny. It's amazing how early you have to go to beat rush hour on the early side. Going home, going from San Francisco over to the East Bay and around, I don't, it was manageable about 9 o'clock at night.
mhm.
So that makes for a long day if it's 4 a.m. to 9 p.m. So I would typically, I would have to choose my days. Is this gonna be an early day or a late day?
Yeah. I
Which is,
remember
yeah.
if coming from San Francisco to the East Bay, you had to leave by 2 p.m.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. There's some days where 1:30 and there's a line backed up, to the on ramp. It's no fun.
We will. It's so nice now. That's one
It
advantage
is.
of the current situation.
Yeah. Exactly. So silver linings, right?
Yes. So what do you think is the future of remote employment, and what do you think could be done differently to make it more effective?
That's a great question, and I'm not an expert on this, but I can maybe share some perspective on it. I would say that so we work on holographic tech, which is like virtual reality, augmented reality, holographic screens, and we've been trying to figure out well, how can you bring that realistic sense of feeling like you're inhabiting the same space to both people across a digital divide like this. And the answer is, I think the long-term future is going to be devices that make your room feel like you've got a window onto the rest of the world. And you
Hmm.
can, using some very sophisticated technology in the future, it will feel like you are inhabiting the same space or a similar space as someone else. So instead of these kind of flat postcard views of a bunch of other people, you're going to really feel like you're in the same location. It's going to be a little bumpy along the way, though. We had a team get together, team lunch in VR, and while it was fun, it was definitely not like the kind of place I would want to have a productive working environment. You know, it was like we were playing around, throwing virtual basketballs and, you
Uh-huh.
know, just doing silly things. So, you know, there's a huge gap between where I think is going to be in the long-term future and where we are today. You know, getting there is going to be a bit of a long road.
Yeah, it actually sounds like your company will be part of the future of remote employment.
Absolutely. But again, it's more on the probably the 5 to 10 year time range. A lot of the tech isn't ready for real time right now.
Hmm.
So we do a lot of cinematic work where you do a lot of processing and then you create a holographic image and then it plays back and looks beautiful. But when you look at the real time technologies for holographic imaging, um, there's sometimes when the technology gets in the way rather than making it better. So there's people working on like live 3D streaming, but it looks so noisy and so uncanny. I kind of oftentimes ask myself, like, why can't we just look at a video now, right?
Hmm.
Like, I would rather see a realistic human face in 2D than some noisy, blobby video game character. And so that's where kind of the state of the tech is right now in real time for holographics. And that's why I say it's more in the future. It's not the kind of thing where tomorrow everyone's going to start buying, you know, VR headsets and streaming themselves, you know, in 3D.
Hmm. Interesting. So, what is the story behind Visby, and what's the journey been like?
It's kind of a, I would say, almost an interesting random walk that later made it clear it was very much on a straight path. My background's, like I said, in film production, video production, with a, you know, heavy dose of kind of hacker, you know, playing around with tech on the side. And you know, I kind of partnered up with my co-founder, who's an academic. I mean, he did theoretical neuroscience, experimental particle physics, and so it was this combination of like, let's play around with video tech, but also let's do some really deep academic research. And so the arc of Visby has really been, we've got a crazy idea for a way to make holographic images and a crazy idea for a way that maybe the future of video will look when all of your screens in some form or another are holographic. And so then we turned around and raised some money and hired some engineers and spent like 3 years in R&D, which
Hmm.
is really long time for a small standalone company, right? A lot of projects that take that long to incubate have to happen either in academia or inside of large companies. But we did the 3 years of R&D. We actually built something kind of completely new. And you know, just to reflect on the journey for a moment, raising money for 3 years of R&D is extremely challenging. But we
Hmm.
were able to get through that, and now we're sort of like coming to market, doing interesting projects, doing interesting deals, and you know, right as all the shutdown happened, we sort of started to catch our stride and start doing real business. So
Hmm.
it's been an interesting arc of it, and one punctuated, frankly, by periods of being remote and being in person. Now back to being remote.
Very interesting. So, how did you incorporate the idea of remote? I mean, it sounds like you just started that way because you wanted to.
Because we wanted to. Also, my co-founder's wife is a doctor, and they live in Kansas City right now as part of
Huh.
her, you know, her medical career. And so we kind of, when we were just the two of us, we were absolutely remote, not just by default, but pretty much all the time. He came out here and would visit me. He's still got roots here in San Francisco, and I went out to Kansas City to visit him a couple times. But our day to day was, you know, phone calls, emails. We didn't know how Slack back then. That's how crude we were,
Hmm.
and some video conferences. So, you know, I got very comfortable with the rhythm of I am seeing my workplace through a computer screen.
Hmm.
So that's
Interesting.
kind of how
So,
we started. Yeah.
yeah, that's cool. So, the ongoing pandemic forced many companies to go remote. You were, and then you weren't. Kind of interesting.
Right. Yeah.
That was on March 16th in the Bay Area. I remember distinctly. It was
Oh, yeah.
St. Patrick's Day. Did that cause any roadblocks or challenges that you didn't expect?
Yeah. Well, I remember there was a heck of a scramble because, you know, we were kind of paying attention to the developments, so it wasn't totally shocking. But when the shutdown order came out, I realized, actually, I had a phone call with one of my engineers that morning, just pre-scheduled. And I kind of asked him the usual battery of questions. So, you know, anything we can do to like, that would, you know, make your work a little easier or anything? And he goes, well, I'd kind of like to have my desktop computer. And I had this moment of like, oh my God, we just shut down the Bay Area as of like midnight tonight, and everyone has stuff in the office still, you know. And we weren't really, I wouldn't say that we planned ahead to vacate the office, but I realized like we need to be ready to be fully remote. So I literally drove into the office, loaded the entire office into my little Honda Fit. I mean, it was like literally up to the rafters. Actually, I had to do 2 trips, and I just drove to everyone's apartment in the Bay Area and dropped off their desk locations, you know, desktop computers and keyboards and second monitors and just like the whole thing. I mean, it was like a moving sale. But once in this kind of crazy, you know, 8-10 hour blitz, I got everyone's stuff to them, and then all of a sudden, the next morning, we were remote. It was kind of a crazy experience. And so the physical hardware was a bit of a like quick, crazy grind. I would say that what has taken longer and is still an ongoing project is starting to recover those daily rhythms, right?
Hmm.
So we very quickly moved the stand-ups to be virtual. they were already semi-virtual. People could call in, right? We didn't have any requirement that people would be in the office. So that was a fairly small transition. But then the like kind of weekly rhythm of meetings and the happenstance and stuff is starting to evolve a bit. But there's still like an impetus for that, right? You know, you got to talk about something, so now it's just a virtual meeting. And so the piece that I think we actually weirdly spent the most cycles thinking about and iterating on is the casual stuff. How do you have a sense of team when everyone is distributed, right? And
Mm-hmm.
and we've been playing around with that. And actually, one woman on our team has been really kind of spearheading that. She's done a great job. Like I really feel like we in some ways have more of a connection as a group because we're all doing video lunches together now. I literally talk to every person on the team every day, and that
Mm-hmm.
didn't always happen, even normally. And then we're figuring out little events one can do that are still remote. There was that, we did a VR session where we all were playing around in a virtual space, throwing basketballs and stuff. And that was kind of fun. And we're doing a variety of little like presentations and almost like book reports, the wrong word for it, but like people share interesting stories at a
Mm-hmm.
preset time. So yeah, I'd say it's been an interesting evolution, and it's ongoing. We're 2 months into this. I wouldn't be surprised if we're still finding our stride in a couple more months.
Yeah, and it's interesting. People get to see, your backyard and how you live. And,
Right, right, absolutely. For a while, everyone's virtual background was my garage because there was a week where we had some competing podcasts, and so competing video calls. My wife works from home now. My son is school from home, so I took a couple calls in the garage, and of course, my team, being the jokesters they are, they took a snapshot of my garage, and
mm.
then all of a sudden I sign in, and everyone is in my garage.
Well, interesting. You have the engineers that know how to do that stuff.
Yes, yeah. No, they're very clever at doing like ridiculous jokes, which is something I particularly enjoy.
Which actually adds to that. Come on, you know what I mean? That sense
Yeah,
of
that sense of camaraderie. Yeah,
yeah.
I think so. It's a core value at Visby. Weirdly, it's not connected to the holographic stuff at all, but we really love like humor,
Mm-hmm.
and as a team, I think we enjoy like laughing together, and that has been really essential these last couple months. It's not to paper over or hide the fact that it's really hard. We do occasionally have the more serious conversations, but it's a highlight of my day, and I think maybe in other employees' days as well, when we all get together and just talk about whatever. I mean, silly things. We laugh for an hour and then we get
Mm-hmm.
back to work, and we would do that in person. I do really recall fondly the lunches we'd have together in person, but we haven't really skipped a beat going virtual in that regard.
Oh, well, that's great. So there are companies like Gabriel that help develop, build, and scale products, especially for startups. I would assume you're still in the startup mode.
We are, as I said, we've got this like deep R&D, and now we're sort of coming up for air and starting to run a little interesting projects behind closed doors that are building towards product.
Well, good. So how important do you think these setups are going to be going forward for companies like yourself that need to hire? It's basically the right talent, and you have very specific needs, I would assume, for engineering.
Oh, we do. Yeah, no, our requirements literally are down to like, they're not all hard requirements, but like the series of different fields of study that are interesting and relevant is incredibly broad.
Mm-hmm.
And so, it's the requirements we have are very complex. That's very true.
Mm-hmm. And I'm
So.
assuming not all of those can be met by the local talent. Although Stanford grads are probably pretty good at all this stuff, right?
They are. No, I mean,
In Berkeley.
we have cast our hiring net as wide as a very small team can, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
don't need to tell you that hiring is a lot of work and it requires a lot of themselves specialized skills. And we have in the past tried to hire pretty far away. We looked into people in other parts of the U.S. We looked at someone in the U.K. And actually, we did briefly hire someone from the U.K., but I don't think we structured it correctly. And frankly, hiring at a distance proved to be pretty challenging. And having gone through it once and kind of failed, I'm not sure. I'm not sure what we did wrong. Again, I'm not experienced in this, but I can tell you it's not as straightforward as being able to call someone in the office, have a conversation, have them present some interesting work. There's a lot of stuff that we would do in person that is missing.
Yeah, no, I agree. So, well, Ryan, I want to thank you for your time today. This has been really interesting. I love the technology you're working on. I can't wait.
Thanks. I love it too.
And I can't wait for it to be here, right?
Give it a couple of years. I think we're going to see something pretty soon.
Cool. Well, I will drive down to your office personally and
Fantastic. Awesome. Thanks so much, Mark. Really appreciate it.
all right. Have a great day.
Thanks. You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.